From the book of Ezekiel. I looked, and a hand was stretched out to me, and a written scroll was in it. He spread it before me. It had writing on the front and on the back, and written on it were words of lamentation and mourning and woe. He said to me, O mortal, eat what is offered to you. Eat this scroll, and go, speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he gave me the scroll to eat. He said to me, Mortal, eat this scroll that I give you, and fill your stomach with it. Then I ate it, and in my mouth it was as sweet as honey. My friends, I have to say, first and foremost, that being here with you all today is one of the great honors of my career. The Calvary Lenten preaching series was something that people started telling me about when I first arrived in Memphis. And, they told me in a here's this cool thing that someday you might get to do kind of way. So when I got the email from Scott asking me to come out today, it was a pretty surprise. And I've had a wonderful time when I've attended some sermons in the past couple weeks and tried all the different culinary offerings downstairs, like tomato aspic and shrimp mousse. It's been a great opportunity for me to learn all sorts of things about Southern food, because when it comes to Southern cuisine, the learning curve for a Yankee like me is steep. My wife Sandra and I were out at a restaurant a couple months ago, and I told the waitress that we had just moved here from Boston, and I didn't know much about Southern food, and, well, what did she think that I should order? And she laughed and made a couple suggestions, and then she said, well, up north, you don't even put sugar on your vegetables. And I kind of laughed because I was pretty sure she was kidding, but I wasn't totally sure. But no, she was serious. And a couple minutes later, I found myself eating a plate of vegetables with sugar on them, and it was awesome. And it ended up being this big moment for me, my first foray into Southern food, which is this journey that I've been on since I got to Memphis. A couple weeks ago, I was at a dinner party with some people from my congregation, and one of my parishioners, the people from my congregation who are going to be wondering who it was Rick Crenshaw. One of my parishioners who described himself to me, I said, are you from Memphis? And he said, I'm just about as Memphis as a person can be. He started explaining what chitlins are and how to prepare them. And as I sat there with my eyes getting progressively larger than my plate, listening to Rick describe this process, he noticed the face I was making, and he said, look, here's how this food works. If you've been given unmentionable things to eat, if you're never going to get the good cuts of meat or the fresh vegetables, but you have to eat what's given to you or you're going to starve, you just have to find a way to make it work. You do what you have to do. You add what you have to add. The secret to the whole thing, he told me, is sugar, salt, and bacon grease. He said, sugar, salt, and bacon grease are the holy trinity of Southern cuisine. I read this to my wife last night, and she said, are you seriously going to make a Holy Trinity joke at an Episcopal church? And I said, absolutely I am. At least 3 people in the receiving line are going to make Unitarian jokes. So I feel fine about it. Anyhow, my parishioner says that sugar, salt, and bacon grease are the holy trinity of Southern cooking, because between those 3 things, you can make just about anything into something that people want to eat. It's about improvisation, he told me. It's about making it work. And since that conversation, I have fallen progressively deeper and deeper in love with Southern food and with the people who cook it. I mean, when I was in Boston, I was aware of yams. I knew that yams are a root vegetable that exists, but I was unaware of the magic, of the sorcery that Southerners are capable of creating with yams. I mean, you understand, I'm from a place where the supermarket has an entire aisle devoted to cans of seltzer and soda water. Like, the Boston attitude is, no, we don't want the soda, it has too much flavor. We'll just drink carbonated water out of the can, thank you. So to arrive here and learn what I've learned has been pretty unreal. I love the food and I love the idea of making it work. The idea of these are the ingredients that I have to work with, and maybe they are less than ideal, but I'm going to make it work. And I'm not going to just make it work. I'm going to make it work so well that someday in the year 2018, when a sarcastic kid from Boston finds himself serving a Unitarian Universalist church in Memphis, Tennessee, and someone offers him a plate of yams, and he takes a bite to be polite, that bite will be so delicious his hair stands on ends. There are many brilliant culinary traditions all over the world that come from this idea. But I've been thinking about this in regards to our scripture today, because the passage that we read from Ezekiel tells a similar story. God has just ordered Ezekiel to speak prophecy to his community, and then God gives Ezekiel a scroll, and on that scroll is written a tale of lamentation and mourning and woe, and God tells Ezekiel to eat the scroll. God tells Ezekiel 3 times to eat the scroll. So we get the impression that maybe Ezekiel takes a little bit of coaxing. You know, his reaction is that, I'm sorry, you want me to do what? But eventually he does. He eats the scroll, and the scroll tastes as sweet as honey. So first of all, this passage is really weird. Like, all of Ezekiel is pretty weird, but this one is weird by Ezekiel standards. People don't talk about this passage a lot. It's consistently amazed me as I've learned more and more about the Bible, how much of it is so rarely spoken about, if it is spoken about at all. In my tradition, Unitarian Universalism, we don't usually use the Bible. When I went to seminary, I had never owned a Bible. I think I'd held one in my hands maybe once or twice. And now I'm one of the very few UU ministers who uses the Bible almost every time I preach. And it bothers people. Many Unitarian Universalists come to our faith from biblical-based traditions by which they feel very hurt. A huge amount of my ministry is sitting with those people and witnessing to the pain that they feel when they hear about the Bible. And I spend a lot of time trying to gently convince them to come take another look with me, to see what can we do with this book that is to them a tale of lamentation and woe. What can we do with it to make it taste like honey again? What sugar, salt, and bacon grease can we add or subtract? Because that is, in fact, all anybody has ever done. Every generation adds their own combination of sugar, salt, and bacon grease to their religious text and to their faith in order to make it into something that they can digest. We all do this, consciously or unconsciously. My godmother is fond of saying that you don't read the Bible reads you. In other words, the Bible is very big. The Bible is, in fact, bigger than any one person's ability to interpret it. So what you see when you look at the Bible says less about what is in the book and says a lot more about what is in your heart. And I know that is an uncomfortable idea. But I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister. If there's anything I'm good at, it's making people uncomfortable. But I bring up the idea anyways because I believe that this is the idea that we desperately need. It gives us flexibility. It gives us the ability to find new sources of hope and love within this book. And if there was ever a time when we could use some new sources of hope and love, this is certainly that time. This time in which we are living feels to me like its own tale of lamentation and woe. Last week, I sat down with the youth group at my church. It was officially a meeting to help plan their youth service, but, it's also an excuse to check in with them about how they were feeling, in the wake of the recent school shooting in Florida. And you know, they all had stories about school lockdowns. They all had stories about active shooters and the fear of violence that they live with day in and day out. That is the tale of lamentation and woe that our time has presented them with and told them to eat. And this isn't the only tale of lamentation and woe of our time, is it? I've been doing this thing lately where I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is I grab my phone and I check all my news apps to see if some new horrible thing has happened, some new tragedy, some new act of violence, some new example of the hate and prejudice that have been so enabled in our country lately. It's a daily thing. It's a daily tale of lamentation and woe that our country and our world are being asked to eat together, and I believe it is traumatizing us all. I think about this, and I think about Ezekiel, who has to eat the scroll, and how the scroll tastes like honey, and I think surely the scroll tasting as sweet as it does, surely that is a miracle. That is an act of God. That is what God can do, what faith can do. And that is what we are called to do as the church. This is our mission as people of faith, to help people consume their lamentations and their woe and their heartbreak and their grief, to recognize the tale of woe that is being told all around us, to hear that tale and to use what resources we have: prayer, service, community gatherings, new interpretations of ancient texts, whatever sugar, salt, and bacon grease are necessary to help them find hope, to help them arrive back at a place of love and understanding. This is part of our call, to help people digest, to help them endure. But we know that isn't enough, right? What does God send Ezekiel to do? What is Ezekiel's purpose? What is his mission? It isn't to eat a scroll. Ezekiel's mission is to speak truth to his community. It is to be an agent of his faith in this world. It isn't enough for Ezekiel to just choke down his lamentations. Ezekiel then has to go forth and speak to the world. And this is where we are called now. This is what we are called to do in our world. I've been thinking about this a lot. My friends, we are people of faith living in an exceptionally difficult time, and people are watching us. People in the decades to come. People in the centuries to come. They're watching us. They're watching how we responded to the time in which we lived. They're asking us, what did you do? How did you respond? What truth did you tell your community? What words of prophecy did you offer? What did you do to stand against hate and violence? When were you silent? In what ways were you complacent? And in what ways were you complicit? People ask me all the time about how to make the church relevant, right? Because I'm that kid they hired. I'm, a young, cool preacher with earrings, so clearly I must know how to get young people interested in church again. And the answer, or at least one of the answers, is simple. Sugar, salt, bacon grease. The answer is we look at the world around us, we look at the tales of lamentation and woe that surround us, and we invite people in and we offer them what we have, what tools we have to help them look at their tale of lamentation and woe and begin to process it and internalize it. And we invite them to join us as we go out into the world to be a voice for compassion, a voice for love and justice and peace, a voice against violence and hate. We make our church relevant by looking at the texts that we have, these ancient traditions that we have and that we love. And we stop ourselves from insisting that what they mean to us now has to be the same as what they meant 20 or 50 or 100 years ago. And instead, we notice what they pull out of us, what they push us to do. And then we do it. And we are the people who can do this. People of faith are the people who can do this. Faith makes the scroll of lamentation taste like honey. Faith makes woe taste like honey. Faith is ultimately what will make this time in which we live taste like honey. If we have faith, then we have the tools that we need. We have all of the sugar, salt, and bacon grease we could ever require. We just need to have the courage to use them, to improvise, to do what we can with what we have in front of us, to be the people of faith that our time requires us to be. Amen.